that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
From coast to coast, American families are facing an explosion of violent crime on their streets and in their neighborhoods. 2020 saw homicides skyrocket nationwide, the sharpest one-year increase in decades. And 2021 is already shaping up to be even worse. Last year, Seattle saw a 61% increase in murders citywide. In 2020, Minneapolis saw homicides hit levels not seen since the 1990s. And so far, 2021 is about doubling last year's pace. Here in Washington, 2020 saw homicides hit a 16-year high, and again, 2021 is already on an even worse trajectory. The situation is devolving all across the country. In my hometown of Louisville, as one report put it, quote, the number of slayings in 2020 dwarfed anything Louisville has seen, obliterating the previous record. Crime and delinquency have many causes. In some ways, the pandemic likely contributed. But it's impossible to ignore that these terrible trends are coming precisely as so-called progressives have decided it's time to denounce and defund local law enforcement. Seattle, for example, cut police funding by 20%. Minneapolis defunded cops by millions of dollars. The District of Columbia City Council approved $15 million in cuts. These boneheaded decisions are the direct result of anti-law enforcement fad that has swept through the political left like a wildfire. And perhaps just as important as these funding cuts is the wave of hostile sentiment that comes with them. Harvard scholars have found that after high-profile incidents reduce the trust that the public and politicians put in the police, the cities in question receive less active policing and subsequently see an increase in crime, including homicides. In other words, in the wake of terrible incidents like we saw last summer, local leaders should look for ways to build bridges and rebuild trust between the vast majority of brave and honorable officers and their communities. Oh no, but instead what they do, from city councils to the halls of Congress, many on the far left decided to crank the knob all the way up on anti-cop rhetoric all across the board. Quote, not only do we need to disinvest from police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. Quote, policing in our country is inherently and intentionally racist. No more policing, incarceration, and militarization. Incredulous people ask whether this nonsense was ever meant seriously. Helpfully, one member of Congress clarified, quote, defunding police means defunding police, end quote. A clarifying comment. A small set of politicians may see selfish opportunities for fame or fundraising if they defame and defund the police, but American families are paying a deadly price. Defunding the police isn't just a terrible idea for overall public safety. It's also a uniquely awful strategy for racial justice. One study recently confirmed that, quote, larger police forces save lives, and the lives saved are disproportionately black lives. So look, I'm not sure exactly how the rantings of the far-left Twitter about crime and policing became official Democratic Party dogma in so many places across America. What I do know is that ordinary Americans cannot bear much more of this, and that goes double for the most vulnerable neighborhoods. Now, Madam President, on another matter, last week the Senate took up sweeping legislation. It touches on big issues that span many committees, from economic policy to national security to scientific research and beyond. 86 senators voted to proceed to this debate, me included. That wasn't because the legislation was ready to go. It happened because there's broad bipartisan agreement that America needs to upgrade our competitiveness with China. Broad agreement that this subject deserved a robust debate and amendment process. Since then, we voted on some amendments, but as of this moment, the Senate's bipartisan work is simply not completed. The Democratic leader indicated that if the chairman and ranking members worked together, if committees put their heads together, their work would get consideration out here on the floor. Well, Chairman Wyden and Ranking Member Crapo of the Finance Committee have a bipartisan provision that's ready to go. They've already done the hard work. They've reached a solution. But thus far, the Democratic leader has refused to include it in his substitute and has not allowed the Senate to vote on it separately. These are long-term issues we're considering. We need to get this right. And during the time this legislation had been on the floor, we've had entire days come and go without any votes at all on the bill. In several instances, the Democratic leader chose to pivot away from this legislation and devote floor time to nominations. So there's no excuse for shutting off debate prematurely before the Senate's been able to have its say. So we'll have to see how today unfolds. With additional amendments, the Democratic leader lets the Senate consider how open a process he permits. Republicans don't want some big fight over this. We'd like to see an outcome, a bipartisan outcome. Even now, discussions are continuing behind the scenes. But the Democratic leader should not try to force a cloture vote prematurely to stifle the Senate before members are satisfied that our work is finished. There's nothing unusual about a minority party denying cloture to secure more amendment votes. I've been here a while. This happened all the time. 6 years ago, even after about 24 amendment votes, Democrats blocked cloture on a Keystone Pipeline bill until the Senate took a dozen more amendment votes on top of that. Just last year, even as the economy was tanking around us, the Democratic leader blocked cloture multiple times on the CARES Act, emergency legislation. Why? He wanted more changes. But I hope it doesn't come to that today. I hope the Democratic leader lets the Senate be the Senate so we can finish this important legislation. Now, one final matter, as my colleagues know, I've been clear and unflinching in my own statements about January the 6th. But as I've also repeated, there's no new fact about that day we need the Democrats' extraneous commission to uncover. The Department of Justice is deep into a massive criminal investigation. 440 plus people have already been arrested. Hundreds have been charged. Even more arrests are said to be planned. And the Attorney General indicates this investigation will remain a top focus. Multiple Senate committees are conducting their own bipartisan inquiries. And obviously the role of the former president has already been litigated exhaustively in the high-profile impeachment trial we had right here in the Senate several months ago. I do not believe the additional extraneous commission that Democratic leaders want would uncover crucial new facts or promote healing. Frankly, I do not believe it is even designed to do that. That's why the Speaker's first draft began with a laughably rigged and partisan starting point, and why the current language would still lock in significant unfairness under the hood. So I'll continue to support the real, serious work of our criminal justice system in our own Senate committees. And I'll continue to urge my colleagues to oppose this extraneous layer when the time comes for the Senate to vote.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S. 1260, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 58, S. 1260, a bill to establish a new directorate for technology and innovation in the National Science Foundation, and so forth, and further purposes.
I suggest absent quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
Madam President.
The Republican whip.
Madam President, is the Senate on a quorum call?
Yes.
I ask you unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Madam President, from the beginning, the story of the U.S. auto industry has been one of ingenuity, of taking risks, and of pushing forward. At the dawn of the 20th century, most Americans could hardly comprehend the idea of the automobile. Yet 20 years later, they had become nearly ubiquitous in American life, thanks to the insistence of entrepreneurs like Henry Ford on making the automobile affordable for the majority of Americans. The democratization of the automobile, rather than the invention of the automobile itself, is, in my opinion, one of the most remarkable and uniquely American success stories. Automobiles allowed Americans to capitalize on the economic dynamism of the Roaring '20s and helped Americans move and adapt during the Great Depression. They contributed greatly to the American industrial base and the know-how needed to fight and win the Second World War, and helped propel the United States to its current status as a preeminent global economic and military power. Visionary investments like the interstate highway system made cars a staple in American economic and cultural life. And cars certainly made it a lot easier to get to and from rural America. In a place like rural South Dakota with limited public transportation, the automobile, often a pickup or an SUV, is typically the only way to get around. Madam President, today the automobile industry stands on the brink of a new technological revolution which promises to dramatically transform mobility once again. Over the past 3 decades, the Internet has transformed our economy and our way of life. And the next generation of the Internet, 5G, which is currently being deployed across the nation, will enable a host of new innovations, including a revolution in vehicle technology, automated vehicles, or what we call AVs. AVs will change the way that we move in numerous ways, making the transportation system safer, more efficient, and more accessible. Individuals whose mobility is currently limited, for example, Americans with disabilities, could gain new independence with the deployment of automated vehicles, allowing them to work or visit friends and family safely and easily. I'm proud that my proposed AV amendment to the Endless Frontier Act was recently endorsed by the National Federation of the Blind, and I ask for unanimous consent that the letter of endorsement be inserted in the record.
Without objection.
Or imagine a farmer in rural South Dakota who can no longer drive to get to town for appointments, prescriptions, or groceries. Enter the automated vehicle. This technology has the potential to keep people in their homes and communities longer. Moreover, AVs have the potential to greatly increase roadway safety. Currently, there are an average of more than 35,000 traffic fatalities on our nation's roadways each year, including pedestrian, motorcycle, and bicycle fatalities. Automated vehicles could dramatically, Madam President, reduce that number. Distracted driving, driving while impaired. Automated vehicles could eliminate those dangers. Madam President, for automated vehicle technology to advance, it is imperative that the regulatory framework catch up with private sector innovation. That's why I've pushed for the enactment of AV legislation over the past several years, and why I had hoped that we'd be voting to add my automated vehicles amendment to the legislation before the Senate today. I've spent nearly 5 years, Madam President, working in a bipartisan manner on a legislative framework to govern the testing and deployment of automated vehicles. The amendment I offered to the bill before us today, an amendment that I had hoped to be able to offer with bipartisan support, would have paved the way for expanded testing and deployment of automated vehicles in the United States under the oversight of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And let me emphasize that oversight point. My amendment would ensure that automated vehicles would not touch pavement without the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration certification that they are at least as safe as a conventional vehicle. The data gathered from the vehicles deployed as a result of this amendment would be crucial to the development of future motor vehicle safety standards for AVs. Unfortunately, bipartisan agreement on my amendment collapsed when special interests expressed their opposition despite major efforts to accommodate their concerns. And I am deeply disappointed that once again Democrats yielded to pressure from special interests against the best interests of our economy and the American people. Advancing AV technology is not just a vehicle safety issue. It's also an issue of U.S. leadership and global competitiveness. Investing in the production of AV technology here in the United States would not only strengthen the resilience of the auto industry, but also the nation's industrial base and our national security. The auto industry touches nearly every American state. For example, Horton in Britain, South Dakota, manufactures engine cooling systems, providing steady, good-paying jobs for that community and strengthening the local economy. The same story repeats itself countless times in communities all across the nation. Providing millions of jobs and investing billions annually, the American auto industry is a critical component of the nation's economy. Right now, U.S. companies lead the world in AV technology, but other nations, like China, are seizing upon regulatory inaction and striving to take the lead. If we don't move forward with automated vehicle technology, we will soon see some other nation leading the AV revolution. Madam President, the legislative package before us today is designed to bolster the global competitiveness of the United States. It is pretty difficult to understand why this reasonable, and I might add, no-cost AV amendment, which would lead to untold benefits for our nation's transportation system, does not fit in. How can a bill making strong investments in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing exclude a legislative framework for AVs? Are we really going to back down from leading the world in automotive innovation and technology and see the future of this industry, I should say, to nations like China? Will we really ignore the enormous safety benefits of these vehicles just to suit Democrats' political convenience? Madam President, more than a century ago, when the automobile was invented, there were plenty of skeptics. But America's automobile pioneers did not let that stop them. They seized the moment and pressed forward and ushered in a transportation revolution. We can do that again today. Or we can cede this moment to nations like China and let the American automobile industry fall permanently behind. That's the choice in front of us, Madam President. I hope we'll choose to seize this moment and pass the legislation we need to usher in another American transportation revolution. Madam President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.